All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel. We take a look at great theories of everything ancient and modern, and try to figure out the best way to use these things to accentuate our own lives, to work on our paradigm shifting, our awakening to 5D consciousness, and or our formation of a holistic worldview. Just grounding information that makes you feel like you have a well-rounded approach and understanding to what's going on in this wild world. And today is just our third day of working on a new unit, which I'm calling the Reciprocal Church, where I think we're trying to do a little bit of syncretism I would say what we're trying to do is salvage the Western tradition. In my opinion, both of the Judeo-Christian religions have been heavily contaminated by their texts that have, in my opinion, been discredited. I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think both of those traditions have contributed to our, to our world, and so I don't want to just discard them. But there may be things that need to be done to shore up some of the holes. And I think a lot of Eastern wisdom and maybe shamanistic wisdom, music wisdom would help the cause. And so we're checking out this book from an American author, Daniel Ingram, who spent a lot of time in monasteries, meditation retreats over in Southeast Asia, and has done as good of a job as anybody that I've seen of putting the Eastern traditions, the Buddhist tradition, Theravada, Buddhist tradition, into our language that we can understand and that we can benefit from. He's got a book here that I believe it originally came out in about 2008, but this is a 2018 edition of the book. It's called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. And it has like everything that you need to know about this. Now, Buddhism, if you're not too familiar, you might think it's some kind of evil thing or cult thing or something. It's none of the above. It's not, I wouldn't even call it a religion. The Buddha doesn't really take the same kind of place as Christ or something like that in a Western tradition. Buddha just probably never existed, just like Jesus never existed. But he also, whoever it was, left behind a method. And the method is primarily through meditation. It's basically, it's just intense experience, intense investigation of your reality that is right in front of your face. If you want to call that evil or satanic, you would be pretty ignorant to do that, because all the method is doing is you're just sitting there and you're watching your reality very, very, very closely. Ingram will talk about how closely you are investigating your reality as we move on. But it turns out that as you begin to investigate your reality, as you're sitting there, you get better and better and better at it until you are able to assess and investigate your reality in a way that you would have never thought that you could before. Your perception speeds up drastically so that you're able to detect many, many, many different sensations in 1 second, as opposed to just, kind of a vague, awareness of them. You're able to tap into your innate abilities, just like any other discipline. And that's what this is about. It's discipline. You have to sit down and do it. And it's not like, I feel Christianity especially is very much schizophrenic. Many of the teachings in the Gospels are counter to what the Christians say they are, where Jesus, everything that he taught, just about, except for 1 or 2 phrases, goes against family values, but they tout family values. It goes against having money and acquiring riches, but they somehow bring that in. Now, I think that is what I would call intuitive Christianity. You're recognizing that the doctrines that you're supposed to be following are not really going to be serving you in the long run, and so you kind of jettison them and come up with a rationalization for why they're not there. So, I'm not opposed to it, but I just think that, it has them a little bit schizophrenic. And one of the things that they always are saying is that there is no free lunch. You can't get something for nothing. But that's exactly what Christianity is. It's a free lunch. It's, we don't have to do anything, just believe, and then then we don't have to worry about it at all. We're going to be saved. Well, it isn't that simple. And what is required at this point is some discipline. We all need to have some disciplines. Not discipline for the man, not I go to work every day, I do my 40 hours a week. Personal discipline where you're trying to improve yourself. It's just like working out and going to the gym. Meditation is something that is exactly the same. It's working out for your mind and soul. And so Daniel Ingram talks about a lot of these things in here. We are just in the preface here. And he just talked about how he is very much repellent. He repels the idea of people trying to idolize or deify me, even in small ways. And so that is something that he is concerned about when writing a book and teaching the Dharma or the law. So let's take over here. It's on page X in the book Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. Dharma friends may be at different stages in the practice, and one friend may teach another something useful. But this has a very different feel from people who are formally ascribed teacher and student. Thus, writing this book allows me to hand them the better part of what I know and to say, quote, if you are really into it, there is more than enough here and in the included references to allow you to plunge as deeply as you care to. End quote. If not, I have wasted little of my time and can avoid being put on some strange and dangerous pedestal or pillory, at least to my face. That said, I do have the explicit goal of facilitating others to become living masters of this material so that they may go forth and help to encourage more people to do so. The more people can teach from a place of deeply established personal experience, the more people will be able to learn the Dharma well. And the saner and happier the world will be. Also, it can just be such great fun to hang out with people who have a real depth of practice and understanding. This brings me to the question of the issue of what some would call hierarchy. The simple fact is that there are those who have attained to various degrees of mastery of various aspects of the skills of clear comprehension and the amazing ways we can modify our minds. And there are those who have not. There are those with strong concentration abilities and those without. There are those who have their morality tripped together and those that do not. There are those who are masters of some techniques and practices and those that have more work to do. While there is a strangely pervasive movement in the West to try to imagine everyone is equal in the world of spirituality, or any other realm for that matter, it is obviously completely delusional and wrong-headed. When I went looking for teachers and friends to practice with and help me along, rather than get mad that some people claimed to know more than I did, and they definitely did, I was excited by the opportunity, however rare, to study with people who knew what they were doing. This just makes sense. Read this as another warning. If you get good enough at these practices, people will often have bad reactions to you if you go around talking about it. And the number who will instead find your achievements a source of inspiration and empowerment, an opportunity to learn something for themselves, as they rightly should, will likely be few. On that same front, it is a very strange thing to have such a completely different language, set of experiences and perspectives from most of the people around me. I can often feel like an alien wearing a trench coat of normalcy, and I dream of a world where conversations about the sorts of events and insights that have come to dominate my everyday experience are much more common and normal. Just like anyone who is truly a fan of some endeavor, in this case, one that is fundamental to all the others as it enhances consciousness and attention, it is hard for me to imagine that everyone wouldn't be totally into this stuff. But for some strange reason, most people clearly aren't. Reading between the lines, you should take this admission as yet another warning. If you go way into this stuff, you will discover this same loneliness. Luckily, the online world allows communities of those who wish to take this deep to gather and support each other. That said, meat space, I don't know what that word is still generally far behind these specialized communities at this point. And so the warning remains valid. Now, I would push back just a little bit on that. I do feel how we people aren't totally into this stuff, and for some strange reason, most people aren't. And if you go into this stuff, you'll discover the same loneliness. But I do feel that things are changing, and that more and more people are going to need this stuff, especially as we go through this roller coaster that we're going through here in 2024. People are going to need something to grasp onto, especially once they recognize that their Christian faith has been contaminated, and that it is a Roman psyop. And they're going to be realizing that at some point in the near future. And people are clinging to that right now, but it can be conclusively proven that the Romans wrote the Gospels and really the entire New Testament, and including Revelation. Revelation is nothing more than a description of Domitian's, who's the emperor, Roman emperor from 81 until 95 AD. Revelation is nothing more than a description of his court. He's got all of these, different colored horses and, trumpets and all of these things. They're described in a book written by Suetonius. He describes Domitian's court, and it's the same description as Revelation. So, all these people who are attempting to come up with all this symbolism about the end times, it's going to come crashing down on them, and they're going to look really stupid, because they're looking into kind of all this symbolism, all this deep meaning, and it actually doesn't mean anything. It's just a description of Domitian's court. Anyway, so they're just making stuff up. It's coming, which is fine. Again, that's intuitive. And it doesn't mean that it's meaningless. It just means that it's not coming from the same source that they think it is. Okay, sorry for the aside, but this is overwhelming to me. Okay, back to the text. This should be seen as another warning. This book and the path presented in it are not for those who at this time find that they are unstable spiritual seekers. Meditation at the levels I'm about to describe requires a baseline mental and material stability, and with respect to the latter, not necessarily wealth or even a 401k, but ethically acquired requisites such as food and a safe, conducive shelter. You must have your psychological trip vary together to be able to handle and integrate the intense techniques, side effects, and results I'm about to discuss. In this book, I will explain in detail what is meant by, quote, have your psychological trip vary together, with the key requisite skills being an ability to identify difficult mind states when they arise and handle them with kindness and aplomb. Luckily, these are learnable skill sets. Again, I would push back a little bit on that. I feel like, yes, we kind of need to have our stuff together, and this isn't for unstable spiritual seekers, but I believe it actually is, because you don't get into the real intense stuff until you have acquired a certain amount of mastery, and at a certain point, beggars can't be choosers, and I think we're going to be beggars here pretty soon, and we're all going to be, not all of us, but there's going to be a general level of desperation out there, and so people are going to need some techniques to fall back on, and hopefully that they will be able to improvise their grounding and their psychological trip stability. There are plenty of gentle techniques and schools of practice available for people for whom it would be more skillful and constructive to apply those techniques. There are also many skillful healing modalities available today to help those who need to heal psychological trauma or clear up barriers to more intense practice. If you need those, you are highly encouraged to do that crucial work first. Many of the techniques and doses recommended in this book are for those who already have a solid platform of mental health and are willing to accept the risks inherent in intensive training. Stated much more explicitly, people who do strong and intensive practices can hurt themselves and freak out. Just as serious athletes can hurt their bodies when they take a misstep or push themselves beyond their limits, just so serious mental athletes can strain their minds, brains, and nervous systems, and strained brains can sometimes function in very strange ways. To rewrite the operating system rapidly while it is running doesn't always go so well in the short term or occasionally in the long term. Thus, while I will include nearly endless exhortations to find the depths of power and clarity that you are capable of, I will also add numerous warnings about how to keep from frying yourself. This is all, the same kind of territory that you're getting into with shamanism, with psychedelics. Definitely you can get fried. Psychedelics is it's a fairly automatic and I guess easy, not exactly easy. You have to embrace a certain level of fear, but it will take you into some crazy states. But you can, overdo it. And so this is the same thing, but this is more under your control. And, these are just warnings. This is not to be taken any more seriously than the warnings that you read, or even less so than the warnings you read on the side of like if you hear a pharmaceutical commercial and they say, oh, the side effects are blah, 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 and you ignore that. So you don't want to ignore this, but this should not be a barrier to you starting and saying, oh, I'm going to fry myself if I do this. No, you're not going to fry yourself if you do it. You might fry yourself if you jump into a retreat and you start meditating 20 hours a day for a month before you've ever started before. But if you go into it with a little bit of common sense, you should be okay. It's also like fasting. Yeah, well, if you fast for 40 days, you could get yourself into some trouble. But if you fast for one day, then you'll be fine. You'll get hungry. But a lot of people will say that I'm not going to fast because I heard all kinds of bad things were going to happen. And so I won't even fast for one day, because I've heard about, crazy things about people who fasted for 40 days. Well, no, you don't want to fast for 40 days until you've, done several other fasts beforehand to prepare yourself. You've got to prepare yourself. That's basically what this is. Okay, so by frying yourself, I mean explicitly severe mood instability and psychotic episodes, as well as other biological and energetic disturbances, with some practitioners occasionally ending up in inpatient psychiatric facilities for various periods of time. Exactly how much of this is nature, their own inherent wiring and potential for mental pathology, and how much of it is nurture, practicing hardcore meditation techniques in high doses, such as those presented here, and how much is related to other unidentified factors is a question that is still being worked out, just so that you are not in any way uninformed about the still developing state of modern science as it applies to the art of intensive meditation. Some who have read this book apparently have only noticed the former message, that being to find the depths of power and resolution you are capable of, a message put in to counterbalance a culture full of people who are underutilizing or not recognizing their inherent potential. And they miss the parts that discuss how and when to back off, a message found in numerous places in this book, much to their chicken-fried detriment. Hopefully, putting this here right up front will again help people to hear both messages and find the balance between the two that works, as I am a firm believer in people being informed not only of the benefits but also of the risks, so that they can make informed decisions and practice accordingly. You wouldn't want to do powerlifting without proper training, spotting, and technique, nor run marathons without lots of careful training, stretching, hydration, great nutrition, and the like. Same with hardcore meditation practice. You also would be naive to imagine that you can push your body to its limits without risk. Same with your brain and hardcore meditation practice. I hope that you will find my take on the Dharma refreshing, empowering, clear, practical, honest, fair-minded, and open. I've done my best to make it so. I would like to thank the very many people whose influence, friendship, support, and kindness went into making this book. My apologies, but I'm going to skip over this, and I'm sure that there are a lot of important names that I'm going to omit here, but since this is my channel, you can get that information directly from this book if you'd like. Okay, a few notes on style. The English language has no great way to use pronouns that refer to a single person without getting gender specific. Again, he's writing this before we had our little pronouns episode here in the last few years and so on. Various solutions exist, such as constantly using he, she, or alternating between she and he, and blah, 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 blah. Anybody who's interested in any of that stuff probably doesn't want to do any of the practices in this book. And if you are so worried about being offended by these various things, you might want to shut off this channel right now. And I really don't want to hear about it. Just deal with people, using terminology that you might have issues with. I must also admit that I am somewhat erratic in my use of capital letters, and you may just have to live with it. Thank you. I have left in only a few diacritical marks above a few Pali and Sanskrit words, removing most of the rest. Okay, that is basically the end of the preface. Now we're moving into, let's see where we're moving into, part 1, the fundamentals. And this is the introduction. So we've got about a couple minutes. Sorry, I'm having a new setup, so it's hard for me to see my time. But I'm going to read a few paragraphs here. If you've not read the foreword and warning, please do so now. The Buddhist path has often been called a spiritual path, and this use of religious language can be very inspiring for some people. The Buddhist path can also be thought of in terms of a scientific experiment. That's me. A Buddhist path can always thought of in terms of a scientific experiment, a set of exercises that the Buddha and his followers have claimed lead to very specific, reproducible, verifiable effects, which are deemed not just worthwhile, but liberative. Using this sort of practical, more scientifically oriented language can also be very inspiring for some people. However, as science doesn't often provide explicit emphases on the meaning and relevance of its findings to living humans with hearts and minds, language and concepts that can bridge that gap are often useful. To inspire a broader audience, I will use both spiritual and practical language when discussing some of the elements concerning the Buddhist path. My preference, however, is generally for the practical language. You can throw out many of the religious trappings of the Buddhist path and still have a set of basic practices that lead to the expected effects. You could also keep all of the religious trappings, do the basic practices, and produce the same results, assuming, of course, that you had the extra time and resources necessary to do both. That said, sorting out which elements are disposable and which are vital for getting the experiment to work is not always straightforward. Some reformative movements can easily go too far when their proponents attempt to remove all elements that don't fit with their current cultural preferences, aesthetics, and biases. So it will be for you, me, and our fellow practitioners and adventurers to help sort this out by our own practice. In this same pragmatic vein, there has arisen a global movement inspired by numerous things and promoted by many people, now often referred to as the pragmatic Dharma movement, which I hope one day will be called something more welcoming of those allergic to words such as Dharma. This movement can be characterized as embracing a worldview that includes the following ideas. And let's see, I think I'm pretty much out of time here. We will go back and go over this paragraph again, and we will be introducing those following ideas in tomorrow's episode. So please stay tuned and tune in tomorrow for more of the Mastering Core Teachings of the Buddha by Daniel Ingram and on my channel. And thanks for tuning in today. Have a great